The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening was released on June 6, 1993. Since then, many people, including myself, consider it to be one of the best Zelda games. With the game getting its third chance in the spotlight more than 20 years after its second release in the Game Boy Color, I figured what better chance would I get to cover it. I'm Mama Luigi, and today we're taking a look at the unused, unseen, and unfinished content in The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening for the Game Boy and Game Boy Color. Sources I used to research the video will be linked in the description below, namely the cutting room floor, which is an invaluable resource when researching this type of stuff, so check the description for their website. Anyway, let's get into it. So to get straight into it, we have a few unused sprites to look at. First, we have these unused sprites for an old man. While it isn't known what it's supposed to be used for, maybe the old men in caves from the original Zelda would have made a comeback. Chances are they just preemptively made a sprite for an old man due to how often they appeared up to that point, but it didn't end up having a location or purpose for him, and he goes unused as a result. We then have this large bat with a skull for a face. It is thought to have been an early version of the buyer's split form, or an early version of the big keys. For all we know, it could be an entirely unused enemy, but we are likely to never know for sure. We also have this earlier version of the dog food item. Pretty self-explanatory, it doesn't seem like a significant change. Then there's this unused sprite of the gorilla. This is unused because the gorilla turns to face the player as you move around the room. However, the gorilla is placed against a wall, so it is impossible to see this in a final game without the use of cheating devices. We then have an unused sprite for the piranha enemies, which are found in the swamps found throughout the game. This shows the enemies swimming either up or down, while in the final game they only swim left and right. There is also this really neat looking lion statue that is located within the tiles for Kanalet Castle and the Southern Shrine. This seems to show that the sprite would have been used as a decoration within those locations. There is also this frog sprite that goes unused in the games, as the frogs found within the game never face this direction. We then have this unused question block that is found along all the other claw machine objects. This may have been used instead of the Yoshi doll earlier on, but a Yoshi doll makes more sense contextually for the trade quest. Next, we have a sprite of an unused open chest that is supposed to be used for the subscreen map in dungeons. This was likely cut to reduce confusion, as the Game Boys already have super tiny screens, and seeing a sprite that looks similar to the normal sprite could mislead the player. This was 100% cut for the best. We then have an unused Kirby-esque map graphic, which is only found in the Japanese version of the game. What its purpose is all up to speculation, but it would have been funny to have two Kirby references in the game. We have this footprint, which is located along all the other icons used in dialogues and signposts, so it was likely to indicate that a player was supposed to walk somewhere. And then we have this magnifying glass, which is also found within the dialogue. This was supposed to be used in the trading sequence, as every other object has a text box version, except the magnifying glass. Next up, and by far the most risque, we have an unused bikini top that is supposed to be used for a mission where the mermaid loses it. In the US version, it was changed to a necklace for obvious reasons, so the other sprites for the bikini also go unused. These next few all have to do with the photographs, which highlight certain points of the game. First, we have unused seagulls, which would have likely been used in the photo for when Marin and Link are standing near a cliff. We then have this really weird looking sprite. Where it's supposed to be is unknown, but it doesn't look like Link all that much, and could be a remnant of a heavily changed or completely unused photograph. We then have this unused version of Link's face during the rooster photo. This was likely meant to be mirrored due to only half of his face being present. Back on to really weird things, we have this super weird Link. His body looks super off, and I, for one, am very glad that they scrapped this. We then have this unused version of Marin, Tarin, and Link. This is also likely supposed to be used in the rooster statue photo, but Link has a much different expression and Tarin seems much shorter. Lastly, for unused sprites, we have this sparkle that was likely meant to be used in the photo that depicts Link stealing from the Mabe shop. The sparkle would have likely been placed somewhere around the shopkeeper's eye as to indicate he is keeping close watch on something, more likely than not being Link. Now that we're done looking at unused sprites, we have some unused text that's found within the game. First, we have text meant to be used when you find a shovel in a chest. It reads, "You've got a shovel. Now you can feel the joy of digging." This goes unused as you cannot receive a shovel from a chest and normally just buy it, or if you're feeling particularly deceptive, steal it. We also have a few unused area names. They read, "Waterfall at the Shrine," "South of the Shrine," and "Entrance to the Animal Village." None of these areas are on the map in the final game. However, it is thought that Waterfall at the Shrine became Rapid's Ride, South of the Shrine likely became Faye's Shrine, and Animal Village sign just doesn't say entrance to the village, but rather reads, "Welcome to Animal Village." We also have text that simply says, "Warp Hole." While whirlpools do exist in the game, they are never labeled as such. Lastly, we have text that reads Mountain Bridge and would have likely been used somewhere in tall heights. Now we have a handful of unused rooms. First, we have this room that is slightly submerged and has some knights found within Canalec Castle. Nothing interesting about this, but the chest has 200 rupees in case you were curious. We then have this room that was supposed to be used somewhere in Canalec Castle. It is thought to have been the original way to enter the castle, but we can never know for sure. We then have these two rooms which would have been used in Eagle Tower, but are completely inaccessible to the player despite being put on the map. One of them is a simple path that was meant to connect two rooms, while another is a pretty bland room that has a staircase in the center of it that leads to the 4th floor and puts the player inside of a wall. This one was likely never meant to be used at all, maybe even be used for testing purposes, but the other one was likely meant to be used but completely forgotten about. So before we move on to the music, here's a little disclaimer. The way most of these songs work is that you enter a secret phrase or name when making your profile, but these vary based off which version of the game you are playing. So no matter what, in most circumstances, these songs would have been unused in at least one release of the game. Now that we have that out of the way, let's have a listen. This first one is one of many versions of Totaka's song which exist within the data. This one is accessible in Japanese and German versions. Have a listen. This next one is only available in the German version if you set your name to Moise. The name Moise is a reference to Claude Moise, who was an editor for the Club Nintendo magazine and a part of the Nintendo of Europe localization department. Pretty neat reference, and have a listen. This one is only available in the French and Canadian versions of the game, and is heard if you set your name to Lolo. Those are most, if not all, of the version-specific songs, but now we have completely unused songs that made no appearance in any version. We have yet another version of Totaka's song that sounds as if it were to be played on the ocarina, and now for my favorite section in just about any video I've done so far, the pre-release footage and screenshots. And oh boy, it's a doozy this time. We have more than 15 pre-release screenshots that boast extreme differences compared to the final. First, we have a shot of the world map, which boasts a wide variety of differences. To put it in one blanket statement to describe the differences, it looks much more like the map in A Link to the Past. It also seems to be a smidge less detailed than in the final. Next, we have the entrance to the face shrine. You can see that the tiles use a grid-like pattern in the pre-release. It has a gap between the entrance and the mount on the left. The armor statues are originally one tile higher, and the unique tiles that led to the entrance weren't present. Then there is an early version of the Moldorm boss fight arena, which was made to look much less broken, I guess you can say, mainly because the first dungeon you gain the ability to jump, and you can super easily jump and hide for protection, so from a game design standpoint, this was a very good change. Also, the door which would have led you to the first instrument was absent. Next, we have an early version of the bridge found in Tall Heights. It seems like the bridge would have been placed over a mountain range rather than the ocean. It seems that it would have just had a much darker background than in the final. We then have this screenshot that shows a section from the graveyard that isn't seen in the final game. Nothing too special, but it's still interesting and seems to show off when the game had a different layout. We then have this screenshot that shows up a slightly different arena for the anglerfish boss fight, which specifically has less rocks on the bottom of the screen and a skull is missing. We have this screenshot of the Hothead boss fight that has the exit on the right rather than above the main arena. This screenshot also shows a much different design for the magic rod than in the final, with the top of it having a much different design than in the final. We then have this screenshot that looks to take place in the Mysterious Woods. Where specifically, we aren't quite sure, but based off the set pieces and the moblin, we can easily deduce that it was meant to be there. We have a screenshot of a map that seems much closer to the final. The pre-release doesn't feature the rivers found in the game. It has a few general differences, but it's close to the final, so hey, potato potato. This one's by far one of my favorite screenshots from the pre-release. So, the Yoshi doll originally had a skinnier sprite, the full moon cello and the coral triangle switched places before release, the wind mambas didn't exist and in their place is a pair of cymbals. This screenshot still uses the original design of the magic wand, which also seemed to be a consumable item originally, and a weird gray slab is present. Other than the first version of the map, this one by far has the most differences. This screenshot depicts an earlier version of the crane game. This one also features the odd gray slab from the last screenshot and the original Yoshi doll sprite. It seems like the Yoshi doll would have been much more difficult to get as it moves around the screen, opposed to staying stagnant in the center as it does in the final. This screenshot, which shows the witch hut, is also super different. The rat is absent and many of the pots got replaced by torches and in general just originally had way less pots. The cobblestone tiles take up a bit more space than in the final, the bed and drawer are missing, and the second torch to the left got replaced with a crate. This screenshot shows the fairy fountain which is found within the mysterious woods. The only notable difference is the southern exit, which was shifted over a few tiles and expanded, but pretty much the exact same as in the final. Here we see the chest which held the tail key, which opens up the tail dungeon. You can see that they moved the chest and the graph down a few tiles, and also flipped the leaves located near the grass. Here we see the early version of the rooster weather ring. It seemed a lot more rounded than the final's more sharp design and seems a little bulkier. This room originally had an L-shaped hole in the center and had a mini mole dorm that seems to have been replaced by a keys. This room has a super similar design compared to the final, and the only difference is that it originally had another spark located on the right of the screen. This room used different tiles for the normal floor and the floor which indicates where a secret item would spawn once a certain condition is met. The southern exit was also expanded a tile, and the blocks blocking the player from going to the left was originally just a simple fence. We have this screenshot that doesn't show any big differences, save for 3 tiles that simply added bushes. Then for the last piece of pre-release images we have available, we have Marin saying, "Unfortunately, it is empty." And what she is referring to is still unknown. I have literally no clue whatsoever in what context Marin would need to say this to the player. So if you have any idea, let me know in the comments below. And that is the vast majority of the unused, unseen, and unreleased content within Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. As a whole, I think this will end up being one of my favorite videos to research and make as a whole, mainly because of how wildly different things were. I can also probably credit to the fact I got to replay Link's Awakening, which is amazing, so be sure to buy the remake, which comes out tomorrow, so go check that out. But yeah, super interesting stuff and super fun to make. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this to support me as a creator. Thank you for watching. Bye guys.